Hello, how are you? Thanks for choosing this video. There's lots more to come on the channel, so please stick around. Hello and welcome to the Cloud Therapist channel. I'm Richard Simon. This is going to be a conference week roundup with myself, the Cloud Therapist. I have invited my dear friend Saim Safdar to host this roundup. I felt it was a little bit more interesting to kind of have this different type of approach rather than just me ranting on solo. I thought I'll drag in Saim into the conversation and get him to actually moderate the conversation and kind of ask some questions as well. So Saim is a CNCF Ambassador and host of the Cloud Native Podcast YouTube channel. If you haven't seen that yet, then you should really be going and checking it out. I've actually done a top 3 recommendations talk on the channel for Saim's video. So do check that out. I'll drop a link in the description of the video for that as well. So Saim, welcome. Thank you very much for accepting to do this. And let's get started.
Thanks, Richard. It's been a pleasure talking to you once again and introducing me. Thank you very much as well. I have seen you been in that plane for our last full week from Vienna to once again going back to London. So I'm kind of interesting to know what we actually have seen. What are the things people are talking about there? So let's begin with the first thing first. Open Source Summit Vienna that you recently attended. This happened between Monday and Wednesday, as of we recording this. It says September from 18 to I think 20 of the September. So can you briefly tell us what is Open Source Summit in general? And you have been visited Vienna. What interesting you have find in the city as well? And what was the main focused and the main area you have seen everybody's talking about it?
Yes, I mean the Open Source Summit Europe is obviously the European side of the Open Source Summit. It's organized by the Linux Foundation. It's actually one of the conferences that they do. Apparently, there's if you look at their website, there's actually quite a few that they do. So they held it in Vienna, in Austria, and the weather there for the first 2 days was just atrocious. That whole region of Europe has been suffering from some really bad weather recently, lots of flooding and lots of injuries, and some people actually even lost their lives, I believe. So it wasn't really a good kind of start to the to the conference. Obviously, we were sort of indoors in the conference arena, so really quite sheltered from that. But yeah, it was quite difficult there, and the organizers actually had some sort of kind of networking sessions. There was like I think a bus tour of the city for Vienna. There was a fun run that they were going to do, and all of those I believe got cancelled because of the really bad weather. So the first couple of days when I was there, the weather wasn't really fantastic, but the venue itself was quite good. I think the only thing I found was that it was quite sparse because the venue was quite large. It was quite difficult to get from one sort of room to look at one talk to the other. There was multiple tracks, of course, and there was I think on 3 floors. The whole thing was on 3 levels, so we were having to kind of go up and down quite a lot and travel sort of around the arena to actually find sort of the rooms for the talks and so on. I think this is probably the first time. I can't remember if I've been to the Open Source Summit itself before, but it's very much a more focused kind of conference, really. It's it's in the sort of the open source space, of course, as the name implies, but also quite focused on Linux and that kind of operating environment sort of thing, rather than your maybe usual sort of open source projects, or kind of how KubeCon is, for example, with the CNCF and things like that. So it was kind of very much focused on that. And also there was obviously, as part of that, a large focus on Linux kernel development as well. So the Linux kernel was kind of very much front and center, of the conference. There was actually a keynote on it as well, I believe. and some of the maintainers were also allowed out of their caves and dungeons to roam the corridors of the conference and kind of do keynotes and presentations and so on. So that's kind of really the main theme. I don't have a huge number of stats on it because I think those have not been released yet. But I understand that all the videos, because all the talks were being recorded as far as I could tell, so all the videos are on the YouTube channel, the Linux Foundation's YouTube channel, so people can go and check them out already. I think there's the one big playlist of them all, or you can obviously choose them individually as well. So that was quite quick in terms of the turnaround and the upload for that content.
Yeah, thanks, Richard, for actually sharing all these details. So before actually we go to the next conference, I want to talk a little bit about more of this thing, because in the community, in the era we're living in, the open source is a big thing for all of us, and we have been consumer of the open source for a very long time. And we've seen recently there is so much shift concern about the community that the company's open source project where this belongs to, they are now changing their license. Grafana transitioning from Apache 2.0 to AGPL, and then we recently see HashiCorp, a big Terraform company, as it shifted their licensing as well. And we've seen this trend is happening all the time. So when you actually been in the participation, you have attended some of the talk, and also I do notice you moderated a session as well. We briefly talk about on that as well. Before jumping into this one, do you see that there is some concern or some research or some sort of opinionated approach, people talking about how should we evangelize the open source in general going forward?
Yeah, I think to be honest with you, and this goes to other conversations that you and I have had, and I've had with other people in the UK as well. I think there's actually there seems to be more concern from the average person like yourself and myself, and others who are kind of in this space, versus maybe the kind of leadership. Linus Torvalds obviously was there. He's the inventor of Linux and the Git repo project. So he did his usual keynote, but there wasn't really, I mean, I attended that and I was there, but there wasn't really a lot of information from him, if anything, around sort of, licenses, how some of the vendors are changing their, open source licenses, and that's kind of affecting, upstream and downstream projects and so on. There was one keynote that actually specifically mentioned that, so I will try and get some details on that, and that was, I think, the only kind of major point that was made around that. I mean, you had the likes of Red Hat and so on were all in attendance, so maybe they were kind of trying to balance things out and not to sort of cause any friction by emphasizing that specific point. But yeah, my talk was really, I was moderating a panel discussion around eBPF, so extended Berkeley packet filter, and that was called eBPF: A New Era in Cloud Infrastructure Tools, or something like that. So there's a number of folks on the panel. Liz Rice from Isovalent, who's part of Cisco, was there, and a number of others also were on the panel. And I think that went down really well. I kind of worked on sort of the moderation for that, asked the questions. There was lots of Q&A at the end of it, and that was really good. I found one talk which was quite interesting. I found this kind of maybe the odd one out of the whole conference. It was called Mastering Windows Monitoring in Kubernetes Environments, and that was ironically by Red Hat. So there was two guys who were presenting that from Red Hat. So I thought I'll point that out. And then the rest of them were kind of focusing on, like I said, because it was a lot more focused on the Linux kernel, there was things like embedded, Android, more sort of open source projects that are satellite to the kernel. So some of the tooling basically around the kernel. And all of these are obviously supported by the Linux Foundation. So it's mostly kind of focused, on that. And then there was one which was called What's the State of Open Source in Europe? So that was by, I think everybody on that panel was from the Linux Foundation. So I think that kind of went towards that a little bit more. Unfortunately, I had to leave for an actual business call, so I couldn't stay for the Q&A. But I think there was a discussion around that in that particular one. I also picked up a couple of other things. So there was a talk around a project called Verta, which is Docker for VMs. So that one I missed, and I definitely want to watch that in the replays on YouTube. And then one of the other buzzwords that I picked up on was profiling. So a company called Polar Signals, I actually did an interview with them. So I'll be presenting that onto the Cloud Therapist channel at some point. And Polar Signals is all about continuous profiling with zero instrumentation. So it's it was described by the founder of Polar Signals as being a kind of, you have your FinOps and you kind of do that as a sort of a framework for cost management and sort of cloud economics, if you like. Then you have things like cloud cost management or cloud cost optimizations, the likes of kube cost and things like that. And then you have profiling, and that's where essentially Polar Signals comes in. So it's like a continuous, ongoing profiling of performance, workloads, resources, and things like that. Some of it leads towards optimization. So yes, you can save costs with what you're seeing in terms of the trends, but also some of it is around kind of just optimization and performance of your workloads in the cloud as well. So very interesting that term kind of was coming in, profiling, and that might be actually something to watch out for in the future as well.
Awesome, Richard, for sharing wonderful details. I think you summed up wonderfully well all of the things we actually been watched during the conference. So just in a few words, or in a very smaller words, if I ask you what you have find in Open Source Summit 2024 in Vienna, so what's your response?
Yeah, I mean, I liked it. I enjoyed it, and it kind of gave me a different view from KubeCon and some of the other larger conferences like Cloud Expo in the UK and even Big London, really, or Big Data London, I should say. So it was a much more focused, conference. It was probably, the keynotes were maybe like 1,000 people, 2,000 people maximum, not a huge amount. Like I said, it was very much focused, and it was a lot more geeky as well and less commercial, I would say, than KubeCon.
Awesome, wonderful. Thanks a lot. And now we actually shift focus toward Big Data London, because I haven't been into these spaces for a very long time, unfortunately. So for the audience, this has happened in UK, and 18th and 19th of September, as we're recording in 2024. It's in Olympia, London. And Richard, can you briefly explain what this conference is all about, and what are the recent trends you have noticing with specifically people talking about generative AI with correlation with big data? So what all these buzz you have been actually come across during 18th and 19th of September?
Yeah, so I managed to attend the second day because I came back from, as we said, this is all happening in the same week. So, I did the Open Source Summit in Vienna, and then I managed to catch the second day of Big Data London. So Big Data London is an annual event, and it's normally, I think, 2 days. I don't think it's ever been more or less than that. There were around, according to the stats, there were around 200 exhibitors, 15 theaters, 300 speakers, live demos, free registration, of course, lots of use cases. There was also, I think this time, for the first time, a startups section. So it was actually a section of the conference which was specifically for small companies, startup companies in that sort of data space. And I think the buzzwords were still, although I did detect these last year because I attended the Big Data London last year, but certainly a lot more prominent this year was the buzzword data observability. So this is kind of very similar to what we're used to maybe in the DevOps space, where we talk about observability and monitoring and things like that. But this is kind of tooling that's specific for data observation. So data observability is kind of focusing on the quality of your data, the performance, the security of the data, the sovereignty of the data, and things like that. So it's kind of really a monitoring platform for all your data. Now, it's not as maybe interactive, as we would maybe expect the normal sort of DevOps observability to be, but it's there to kind of generate those metrics and give you those statistics that you require around the quality of your data, shall we say, and the management of your data as well. So it's not to manage it, it's not to maybe interfere with the data or to manipulate the data, but it's actually there to observe and then give you stats and analyze the performance of your data and things like that. So data observability, that was one of the terms. Obviously, you can't get away from generative AI. That was certainly there. So you had SaaS solutions that were based around generative AI. Again, I did some predictions around this earlier this year, and I said a lot of people are going to come out with sort of SaaS solutions around generative AI, and I saw a lot of that. Things like AI Ops was there as well. Analytics, of course, and sort of business intelligence, and then also a lot more around sort of data management, data storage, and data quality as well. Those were all kind of part of it. I also noticed that while you had the more sort of traditional vendors, the likes of Databricks, IBM, Snowflake, Microsoft, Cloudera, Starburst, Data EQ, these guys were all there. So these are kind of the more established vendors. There was also a number of new players that were coming in. And the one that I really picked up on was a company that's actually been pushing out a lot of messages on LinkedIn recently, Monte Carlo. So they're called Monte Carlo. I spoke to a couple of their sales guys at their stand, and they kind of gave me the history, the background of the company, which I completely forgot after 10 seconds. But the point is that they were in that data observability space. So I was actually due to do a interview with them on their stand about the, Monte Carlo and their kind of, what is data observability and so on. Unfortunately, the guys who, would normally do that were actually on speaking, sort of slots at the time. So they were actually doing presentations at the time. So I couldn't really get around to doing it, but I have connected with them, and hopefully we'll be able to get something on the channel in terms of talking to Monte Carlo about data observability. So that was one of the new names. There was a number of other ones that kind of I picked up on as well. So the likes of Kibula, Fivetran, which again I've seen a lot on LinkedIn, Stream, spelt with a double I, DataOps.live, which is another one, Actian, and InfoSepts. So a number of those that were kind of in that new space. These were not the startups. These were actually, their stands, their booths were quite much bigger than the startups, but they were actually relatively new in terms of the actual companies exhibiting as well. So that was quite interesting to see kind of newer names sort of coming into the space. In terms of themes, I picked up on, you asked about that, and data analytics, definitely. A new one which I kind of picked up on, probably a renaming of business intelligence, called decision intelligence. So that was quite interesting to pick up on that. And then you had a mixture of data fabric, which is kind of more about the architecture of your sort of of your data platforms, and data mesh, which is more about the management side of it, and the access side of it, and the sort of analytics side of it as well. So those were there. And then on the other side of it, you had ML ops and data science, again, as part of that. And they all had their own theaters. There was a modern data stack theater, there was a fast data theater, there was a data ops theater, and also a teams and culture theater, which I thought was quite interesting. I didn't have to say, I didn't get around to kind of sitting in on a lot of the talks, but again, the talks that I did see and the ones that were in the guide were quite varied. So a couple of points there. I picked up the guide from the conference. This was quite interesting. That's the event guide. And one other point that one other book, I should say, or booklet that I picked up was from Data EQ. So this is called Innovators of Data Science. And it's like a history of data science and so on. But funnily, it's done in a comic book form. So let me show you a page that you can actually maybe kind of pick up on. It's done in a comic book form. I don't know if you can you see that okay?
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Visible.
Yeah. So it's kind of done in a comic book form, but it's kind of telling you the history of kind of data science and who were some of the sort of key names and and inventors or whatever of various things. So I'll certainly be reading through that and getting to understand that a little bit more. But that was, I think, from the Data EQ or Data IQ stand, and they were kind enough to offer me a copy of that because I had some conversations with them and I'd spoken to them actually prior as well. So yeah, so that was all kind of part of it, and I thought it was really interesting in terms of how everything was being presented. Like I said, there was a lot of focus on these new sort of areas like data observability and so on.
Awesome. Absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you for sharing all these kind of detail. And I see there's a need of observability everywhere in place right now. If you look at the system, and I think, right, if somebody is making some good bet with policies as well, you can observe something and then you see something has been broken or need immediate intervention, you can bring some policies at organization level, you can talk about it as well. So thanks once again, Richard, for sharing all these kind of stuff. So one final question before we move on to the next conference segment is, this is happening again in next year, again in UK, Olympia, London, in 24 to 25th of September. If some of the companies, let's say, watching us currently, and even in some of the other outside of the big data space, so what folks you recommend go and join the conference again, and what sort of the companies should be participating in this conference?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's anybody really, in terms of attendees, anybody who's interested in the data space, because this is, based around sort of data specifically, and hence the name of the conference. So anybody who's kind of, in the data space, the database space, data management, security, and so on, anything really related to data ought to be attending. And I think you'll find that the talks some were technical from the vendors themselves, and others who were kind of more from analysts and kind of the marketing side and the business side were a lot more focused on kind of strategy. Why would you want to do things like cloud data management or data observability platforms and things like that. So it's a mixture of a number of those types of folks that can really or personas that can really attend the conference, and I think there's enough for everybody there to get from the conference. The only thing I would say is that it is a lot more oriented towards sales than necessarily technical, but there is enough technical there, and certainly all the vendors were happy to talk technical to you. So if you kind of wanted to go and talk about data and things like that, then that was kind of how you migrate data, or how you what kind of database can you choose, or should you be choosing kind of for your as your corporate database, and how do you do things like data warehouse and data lake and all the other kind of stuff. You can certainly do that with the vendors, because the likes of DataStax and the other sort of established players, Microsoft and Cloudera, they're all there as well. I did actually do I have done a review video for Big Data London, as I did for the Linux format or the open source rather conference as well. So I'll be doing reviews of these two conferences. I also did an extra talk as well, which I called what did I call it? I think I called it Data State of Play. So I actually did that with the great folks at Enterprise DB as well. So I did that at Big Data London. So hopefully all of that stuff will be coming to the channel fairly soon. But yeah, it was, it is a good opportunity to really focus, like we get the security ones. I really like Big Data London because it just focuses on data, and there's so many things that you can, so many areas of data that you can go into, and I find that really useful to do.
Yes, absolutely. And even though like companies and individual working on data for purifying the LLM, so understanding how to purify, filter, and what to ask for the data is very important. And this conference, I think, has uh, some good areas that you should go and talk to people about it as well. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, you have to move on into another
Yeah.
segment. If that is still interesting to you, you can actually visit the Big Data London once again in 24 and 25 September 2025. Now we have to move on for the next conference, that is SRE Day, and for the beginner, this means Site Reliability Engineering Day, and it's held in Canary Wharf, London. And Richard, can you give us a quick summary of what all the things you have noticing? And also, I wanted to know a bit about the details, because some people thought the SRE is getting faded away from us because of this platform engineering uh, buzzword, and people don't care about what is SRE now. It's just embedded in the platform engineering. Just forget
Yeah.
about it. Well, what you have noticed on this conference, because this is happening pretty often in different places across the globe as well.
Yeah.
But now we're speaking about SRE London particularly.
Yeah, so so SRE Day it was actually held in a cinema in Canary Wharf, which is a part of East London, and it was held over 2 days. Again, I only managed to attend the second day. It has 50 plus speakers, 6 tracks, 250 plus attendees. It felt like actually there was a lot more than that there. It's organized by a couple of brothers who are absolute giants, and I actually managed to take a photo with them, as I did, I think last year, because I couldn't go last year, but the year before. They're like 6 foot something, absolute giants. So Miko and Mark Polikowski, they're the organizers and keynote speakers as well. And Miko Polikowski actually has been on my channel in the early days. So I actually did a review of his chaos engineering book. So he's written a book on chaos engineering, and actually did a talk with him. So again, I'll drop the links to those videos in the description. So the keynotes included things like automated incident management, history of DevOps, which is quite interesting, 30 minutes of history of DevOps, and infrastructure as code, all part of it. Big focus areas in terms of the content of the presentations was SRE, of course. Automation was there's quite a lot of that. DevOps again, and also platform engineering as well. There was actually, I think, one talk that actually said DevOps is not dead. So it was very on point in terms of that kind of, the DevOps versus platform engineering sort of thing. So he was very adamant that DevOps is not dead and platform engineering is only complementing DevOps, which I think I kind of do agree with to a large degree. I've actually written again an article for my employer, T-Systems, around platform engineering. So that should be coming out on their website fairly soon. I said when it comes out, I'll drop a link for you in the description of the video as well for that. There was less on GitOps and chaos engineering than I think the last couple of years. So last year I wasn't there, but I do remember looking at the agenda, and certainly the year when I was there, the year before that, there was a lot more on GitOps and chaos engineering. So chaos engineering, I got a hint that the name may actually change, because people are looking at the word chaos and maybe thinking it's a little bit negative in terms of what it actually means. So maybe chaos engineering might get a little bit of a kind of a refresher at some point. But the around platform engineering, you and I picked up on this kind of developer self-service, the IDP, the portal, the internal developer platform or portal, all of that was there. But again, the buzzword, just like with Big Data London, we had data observability. A buzzword that was in there was insights. So there was a lot around insights. People were kind of including that in their talks and their titles and things like that. A lot around insights as well. I don't know exactly what they kind of meant. Maybe they just kind of meant normal observability tools, maybe AI ops, but certainly insights, seem to be kind of quite prominent there. And again, there was, because SRE is a smaller event, it's 2 days, it's kind of very much focused on that, sort of SRE type of role, that kind of tech support role, cloud ops role, and so on. There were also kind of, a lot more of the titles of the talks, which are kind of, sort of the anti-pattern, if you like, of the standard talks. There was one I picked up on called "How to Destroy an SRE." So that was kind of, if you don't want to keep your SREs, this is how you need to treat them. But obviously, the idea is that you should not be doing that, and you should be doing these positive things instead, in order to keep your SREs and keep them in your organization. But that kind of anti-pattern approach was certainly part of the some of the presentations at the event. And again, Open Telemetry was there. Like I said, DevOps is not dead was one of those. And the whole sort of generative AI, ChatGPT, large language models, and LangChain was all part of the talks as well. There was a number of talks that were kind of dedicated to those. I think the best thing about it, because they have changed venues, I believe, from last year and certainly the year before, actually holding it at a cinema. You were actually in the cinema theater. That's where the presentations are. This cinema in Canary Wharf has 3 screens. So you were literally sitting, and if I don't know if you're familiar with, well, I'm not sure everybody's familiar with the Everyman chain of cinemas. I don't know about in other countries, but certainly in the UK, they don't have kind of the normal seating and the luxury seating. They have like it's like a sofa. It's like you're sitting at home, basically. That's how their seating is arranged, which is quite cool. So again, if I find a shot of the insides of that, I'll maybe try and include that in the description of the video. But just that format and actually having that venue was actually quite cool. The food was excellent. It was actually much better than at the Open Source Summit, to be honest with you. So that was kind of my experience. And the service and the staff were absolutely fantastic. And again, lots of there was a number of exhibitors there, a number of sponsors, lots of merch, lots of freebies to pick up, lots of stickers, all sorts of stuff going on as well there, which was absolutely fantastic. So because of the smaller number of attendees, you could network a lot more. People were a lot more kind of talking to each other. I met a number of people and had conversations with it. A couple of friends of mine actually were there as well. And they again, I did ask for their feedback, and their feedback was extremely positive. I did do a kind of a concluding talk with Miko Polakowski. So again, that will be on the channel at some point, and I'll definitely be doing a review of the SRE Day conference as well. But all in all, yeah, very positive. And I like it. I actually like SRE Day a lot because the guys, Miko and Mark, are very supportive, but also because the type of content there is very focused in that space, which you don't really get in other areas. There's a lot of talk about kind of DevOps and platform engineering in other spaces, but not enough on SRE. And I think that this kind of does justice to that. Hey, if you are enjoying the content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That would really help me out. Thank you.
SRE days, DevOps days, KCDs are the global event where every country from the organization or from the organizer actually held some events locally for educating their community what's going on in the international community. That they bring in people from locally and also from the international community, and all people sit in and talk about some new innovation, and that's specifically very focused event as well. So SRE Day that we're talking about is held in London and also happening in so other places in Europe as well. Also, there are similar events in DevOps, and those are called DevOps days. And then there's a specifically for the Kubernetes focus that's called Kubernetes Community Days. And one of the one is happening, I think, next month, where Richard will be, hopefully going, and that's called KCD UK. And hopefully we can pick some some more buzzwords from that conference as well.
Definitely.
So last question before we wrap up this
Yeah.
wonderful series is that for the SRE day, like if what are the companies, if we have a new startup, we build up a new startup, could we go for the Open Source Summit Vienna? Could we go for the Big Data London? We could go for the SRE day. And also for the individual perspective, let's say if I am more focused on SRE and Kubernetes and observability space in general, which conference do I go and visit and see what's happening there?
Yeah, I mean, I think in order to try and get as much of everything as possible, you maybe want to kind of go to the largest one possible, and obviously that's KubeCon. So if you can do the sort of the European one or do the the North America one, and that's probably the place to go, because that will encompass a lot of the DevOps, platform engineering, SRE. Probably not as much on the data side, because that is a different type of vendor space. You will get storage, but not necessarily data, I think, in KubeCon. But certainly all the others that we've talked about, SRE, platform engineering, GitOps, chaos engineering, DevOps, etc. All of that stuff, I think you can certainly cater for in KubeCon. So if you can make it to KubeCon, that's probably the best place to go. Otherwise, yeah, just look for the local versions of these, and if not, you've got local meetups maybe that you can look at. And I think if all else fails, you have webinars. And certainly, the likes of the Open Source Summit, as I said, all their videos have been uploaded. All the talks, for the videos have been uploaded now on their YouTube channel, so you can go and check those out and actually see what's of interest to you there. Unfortunately, as far as I know, Big Data London is not recorded, so the sessions, maybe some of them are, maybe the keynotes, but certainly not all the talks are recorded. And SRE Day is definitely not recorded. But again, like I said, I try to cover that, so you can actually come back to the Cloud Therapist channel and check out some of the reviews I'll be doing for all of these conferences. There'll be videos on that, and I've done some interviews, as I said, as well. So all of that will be coming out on the channel over the next few months.
Awesome, wonderful, Richard. And just to wrap up in few words, and there are some quick fire questions for you, so people might be interested in learning from you as well. Where was the food so better for all of these conferences?
The food? Are you talking about the food?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I think SRE Day was probably the best one, because Big Data London, you just have to go and get your own food. They don't really serve anything there, because it's a free conference. The registration is free at Big Data London, so they don't really offer any food. But certainly SRE Day, I think, was much better, definitely. Yeah.
Awesome, great. And just final question: what is the new thing? What is the flavor in Vienna? What's new thing that people only see in Vienna? And any memories from that?
Well, once the weather got better, I think it's certainly. I mean, Vienna is Austria is quite known for its musicians, so for music and the classical music. So a number of the themes actually at the Open Source Summit were around music. So they were actually kind of bringing in symphonies and classical music, kind of having using that theme within the presentation. So that was quite cool. And Vienna itself is a lovely city. So yeah, I mean, I didn't get a chance to see a lot of it, unfortunately, but we did have a couple of networking evenings, and I had some private dinner with some of the folks that were on the eBPF panel. So that was really good to actually get to know them a little bit more on a personal level as well. So those were the highlights.
Awesome, wonderful. So thank you very much, Richard, for inviting me to learning from you what I have missed for these 3 conferences and giving me all the summary as well. And hopefully people are delighted to listen what you actually came across quite recently. So over to you, and you can wrap up the episode.
Yeah, thank you very much, Saim. I really appreciate you doing this. I thought it would be just much better to kind of go back and forth in terms of the questions rather than just me kind of ranting at the camera. So I really appreciate you doing this. Please do check out Saim's channels. That's the Cloud Native Podcast. I'll drop all the links in the description of the video. So please go and do that. If you're not subscribed to his channel, please do that. Don't forget to drop some comments as well. If you have been to these conferences, let us know what you thought of them and give us some comments about, the conferences, what your thoughts were, what some of the favorite talks and themes and topics and things like that as well. Appreciate that. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, please, and I will see you next time. Bye for now. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to support me. You may also want to check out some of the other videos on this channel. Bye for now.